understand. It was gonna be a big thing. It was gonna be important. It still is important to me. It was gonna be Mario's glove.
On December 13th, 1998, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker, in the middle of a feud, fought for the last spot in the upcoming Royal Rumble. This pay-per-view event was called Rock Bottom, named after Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's finishing move. The event was over 3 hours long and featured some of the most iconic wrestlers of all time. The Rock was in the middle of his big heel turn, calling the audience stupid and trailer trash in response to boos and jeers. Storylines were coming to a head, stakes were high. It had a sold-out audience of 20,000 people, and close to 300,000 more were watching at home. And there was one phrase all those people kept hearing.
Rock Bottom is presented by Glover. New Nintendo 64, gotta love the glove.
Gotta love the glove, baby. That's right, a big-ticket WWE show match smack dab in the middle of the Attitude Era was plastered all over with the face of a little glove. This was advertising for Glover, a Nintendo 64 platformer where you played as a glove who jumped and rolled balls around. If you're like one of the many people I've spoken to and you haven't heard about Glover, you might be thinking, why did this niche, weird little game bother sponsoring such a big event? Listen, I have been unhealthily obsessed with Glover for months now, and I believe that Glover was important. So instead of asking why it sponsored wrestling, what you should maybe be asking is, where did Glover go? If Glover was important, why does nobody remember it? Why does nobody care? How did they forget? Glover begins with a cutscene of the castle, where the wizard did what we professionals call the accident, where Glover saves all of these magic crystals from shattering by turning them into bouncy balls, and they bounce all over the place, and Glover is tasked with retrieving all of them to save the land. Oh, that's it. That's actually the entire plot. It was a simple premise, yes, normal platformer things. Do things and collect things and jump on and over stuff. However, Glover was not a normal platformer. It was a weird one. And Glover was a glove, which meant that he could do glove things, like roll a ball around, throw a ball, and move in both human-like and glove-like ways. It was interesting, because Glover as a character had so many functions. His 4-finger design meant that the fingers on his gloves also served as his arms and legs, meaning that when he wasn't moving the ball around, he could move and jump like any other platformer mascot. This dual-purpose design, both man and glove, was something the developers took and ran with. An idle animation shows Glover lying down as a humanoid, but also as a hand idly tapping its fingers. They found ways to establish Glover's personality in both his forms at the same time, and can I say, I love this little guy. He's so earnestly cheerful. Like, instead of teetering precariously on a ledge, he just chills out and sits down. He's so cute, but in a cool way. He's fun. And when you played the game, they made sure you thought about every single aspect of Glover. With his goal being ball retrieval, you had to worry about 2 things, you and the ball. If Glover fell off, you lost a life. If the ball fell off, you still lost a life. This is some serious stuff. Yeah, compared to a lot of platformers where exploration was the main focus and new areas were playgrounds to jump around in, Glover leaned a bit slower, a bit more cerebral. Stages weren't playgrounds, they were more linear obstacle courses. You had to sit down and really figure out a plan before going for it, and then you had to execute. And the controls were generally pretty cool. They weren't perfect by any means, especially the camera controls, but most of the time, they felt pretty smooth. And considering how different this game was to other platformers, combined with the sheer amount of things Glover could do, it was impressive. This came out at the height of mascot platformers, and it still found a way to be unique, all while staying thematically solid around the glove idea. Glover was a weird protagonist, but I'll be damned if they didn't squeeze every last drop out of him. I'm not going to say that Glover was ever going to be the guy glove that dethroned Mario, but it feels like, at the very least, he should be in the same league as, like, Crash Bandicoot, or Spyro, or even, like, Gex. But people remember those. Those get new games or remakes, and Glover never even got a second game. This is why I'm here talking to you right now. I wish Glover had a legacy. I wish Glover got what it deserved. I wish more people remembered what Glover did, how fun it was. When Glover is remembered, it's as this weird B-list platformer that nobody played. In fact, Glover's primary legacy right now is Nintendo gaming YouTubers. I'd wager that of the people watching this video right now who knew about Glover prior to watching, 20 to 30% heard about it through the Angry Video Game Nerd. Another 40-ish% maybe watched one of these. A few watched some Let's Play a decade ago, and the rest of you are approximately 35 years old. To all of their credit, I like most of the YouTube videos about it. I think they do a good job. Their job is to document these games and throw in quips and jokes and be generally entertaining while doing it. It's good, of course, but I don't think any of them really love Glover. And that's fine. It's just that most of them use Glover as, like, a joke. It's a bit strange. It feels like with all of these videos, Glover is so close to being remembered as something significant, to having fans that hold on to it. But at the end of the day, people laugh at it and then move on. Glover Behind the Scenes is a short documentary about the making of Glover, mostly comprised of a lengthy interview with the Oliver twins, the British twin brothers who founded Interactive Studios, the developers of Glover. The twins were absolute phenoms of game development for their time. They started publishing their first games in magazines while in high school, 2 years before the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System. They would go on to create one of the most popular British game series at the time, and their studio eventually caught the attention of Hasbro, who was looking to break into video games. Eventually, they talked, and the concept of Glover was created. I really loved watching the twins talk. They spared no detail about the process of making Glover. I listened to them talk about how they were inspired by golf games, but hated how you had to just sit there and watch after a shot. That feeling led to the idea of a hand, then a glove, then all the stuff you could do with a glove and a ball. Eventually, their original idea of whack and roll became Glover. I listened to them talk about their 10-man team and the pains of programming and porting. I listened to them talk about the long meetings they had with their studio and their publishers, the big dreams they had for this game to be one of the flagship games for the Nintendo 64. I listened to them talk about how unlucky Glover was, how close it was to being something else. You see, when developers wrote games for Nintendo consoles, they had to show them to Nintendo first, and if Nintendo liked the idea enough, there was the possibility that they would want to be the publishers of it and have an active role in the design process. The twins described it as something that was great news for developers if it happened, that those teams Nintendo chose were given resources, tons of marketing, all the things you could want as a developer. Their current publisher, Hasbro Games, was funding them well enough and had every intention of making Glover a success, but obviously if the team could make the choice, the power, the money, the name recognition of Nintendo was something you would never want to pass up. Shigeru Miyamoto wanted Glover to be Mario's glove. Hasbro had to send an early copy of Glover to Nintendo so they could approve it, and they didn't just approve it, they wanted the rights to publish it and make it a spin-off of the most iconic IP in all of video games. They wanted to advertise it, to make it sell, to fill shelves with it. Glover was going to be something bigger. The deal, of course, ended up not going through. Glover stays with Hasbro and sells all right. The reason for this is mundane. It wasn't that the twins vehemently disagreed with the creative changes Nintendo might make. It wasn't that Nintendo changed their minds and turned back on their word. It was because of contract issues, business disagreements between Nintendo and Hasbro. In their words, there was a few bits of back and forth, contractual negotiations with Hasbro, and unfortunately, it all fell apart. But there was a time where this was going to be Mario's glove. It's not fair, right? You've got this great game, one that took years to make, one that could be even better with a few more resources, and you've got all you could ever want laid out right in front of you, offered to you, you earned it, and then you just can't. It doesn't feel right. In their interview, neither twin seems incredibly torn up about it. They tell it like it's a little fun fact about the game. I couldn't even find the info anywhere else online. They make sure that they tell you the stakes, that this is something that they really wanted, something that they feel they didn't have much of a say in, but it doesn't feel like they're bitter about it. Maybe that's because they still ended up making Glover, a game they loved and a game that did pretty well, but Glover was, in this moment, unlucky. unlucky in a way that changed the trajectory of its existence. I mean, maybe nobody would still be making Mario's Glove games, but I think it probably would have sold well, gotten a couple sequels, right? Maybe the way people talk about it wouldn't be, oh, there's a weird N64 platformer that never went anywhere. Maybe the titles and thumbnails of videos about it wouldn't just be memes and jokes. Maybe, like with so many other Mario games, somebody would talk about what really made it special. When you watch this mini-doc on YouTube, you can feel how much these two loved Glover, still love Glover, and how much fun they had with it. At the time I'm recording this, the video has just over 4,000 views. It has 42 comments, most of which are about how the angry video game nerd just made a video about Glover. That video has 1.5 million views. Glover continued development under Hasbro with a budget that was still fairly impressive, a budget that allowed them to make a game with a lot of heart and a few rough edges. It was far and away still the most money the twins had ever worked with, and they weren't just trying to make the best game they had ever made, they were trying to make something that would rival the best games on the N64. Of course, that's a tall task. Its steepest competition was Mario 64, which had released 2 years earlier and is still lauded as one of, if not the best platformer of all time. Glover wasn't the only one chasing Mario's success either. Sonic, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Donkey Kong, Klonoa, Chameleon Twist, Croc, there were so many. In this way, a lot of the smaller ones are kind of like Glover. The Glove certainly hasn't been uniquely forgotten, really, because for every game that is beloved or fondly remembered, there are dozens that have been quietly left behind in the past. All of them are vying for just a few spots in our cultural memory, which will continue to move on with or without them. How much longer do you think people will know about Spyro the Dragon? What about Bomberman? Even if you win this fight for relevance, the winners don't last forever. But we both know that'll never stop anybody from trying. Interactive Studios spent the rest of the time before their release polishing levels, mechanics, everything they could to make Glover as good as possible. Eventually, of course, the development came to a stop and the game was finished. Glover released on November 16th, 1998 in North America. The #1 song at the time was Doo-Wop That Thing by Lauryn Hill, and there was a meteor storm visible all over the world. The game reviewed well. It seemed that critics liked it quite a bit. Most reviews were somewhere near an 8 out of 10, maybe a 7.5. Nintendo Power said, "It's completely original and inventive. The play control is extraordinary." IGN said, "Until you've rolled a ball around a level with a walking hand, well, you're just missing out on the best things in life." That's not to say that nobody had complaints about the game. Some reviewers said it wasn't intuitive. Others said graphically it looked like it should have come out 2 years prior. But really, things were generally positive going into Glover's release day. There was just one thing. Years and years of work had led to this. In a way, many people's entire careers had led to this release day and the months that followed where Glover would be on store shelves. It was, for many, the largest project they may ever work on. But, of course, scale is relative. There's always a bigger fish. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time released 5 days after Glover on November 21st. Certainly, it was the most anticipated game in years and was, perhaps, the finest the Nintendo 64 ever had to offer. It was a game unlike any that had come out before it, and even today it is looked at as one of the greatest games of all time. Glover was, in comparison, clearly insignificant. There was no competition. Even if Glover had the jump by 5 days, very few people were going to buy it when Ocarina of Time was about to come out. When you adjust for inflation, N64 games costed upwards of $100 in today's money, and that money you spend on Glover was probably better off being saved for just a few more days. The November 1998 issue of Nintendo Power was advertised as the biggest issue ever, and it still stands as one of the most iconic issues in no small part due to its cover. This amazing art of Link gives us a small taste of what's inside. Previews for the game, guides for its first 3 dungeons, maps, of its areas, all delivered in this really stylish way that even reading it back today makes me want to pick up the game. Further, in the issue, there are several advertisements, a section on Banjo-Kazooie, which had come out 5 months prior, and, of course, a 7-page piece on Glover. It outlined the first few worlds of Glover, and it gave some tips along the way. It was certainly a fine enough way to get word out about the game, but looking back on it today, it was clearly one of the most forgettable sections of the issue. It's right next to great pieces on absolute classics, a preview of the new Game Boy Color. Even the section on Superman 64 has now become more notable because of how much everyone would grow to hate that game. When you get to the reviews section, you're greeted with a glowing 9.5 out of 10 for Ocarina of Time, and right below that, a 9.3 for Turok 2. If you flip over 3 more pages, you'll find Glover with a 7.4. The thing is, they didn't really say that much negative in their review, aside from a knock on the story, which is more than fair. I think the review says it best. Although Glover doesn't have a big name like Zelda or Turok 2, it's a quality game that won't disappoint. Its worst failing is that it is being released at a time with so many other great games. Glover ended up selling fine. Modestly well. It wasn't a flop by any means, but how painful must that have felt? Your deal with Nintendo falls through, and then on the release day of several years' worth of your work, you are reminded of the vast difference between you and what you could have been. I don't think Glover ever would have been as important or as critically acclaimed as Ocarina of Time, obviously, even if Nintendo had picked it up, but the fact still stands that this wouldn't have happened. The game would have had more marketing, more name recognition, more budget, and maybe most importantly, there's no way that Nintendo ever would have released that game in a competing time frame with their biggest release ever. I'm not sure when Hasbro made the call to give Glover this release date. They could have locked the date in before they knew about Zelda, or it could have been a decision to try and ride Zelda's coattails. You know, so many people at game stores because of Zelda, big spenders wanting to get multiple games for the holidays, even people picking up copies of this huge Nintendo Power issue and eventually finding Glover in there. All these things could be upsides, I guess. But looking back right now, it kind of feels like Glover never even got a chance to shine, even though it did so many things really well. Even its sales, it sold fine, generally decent, but there was no hope. Every time it got out of one shadow, it stepped into another, and these are shadows cast by the absolute giants of the gaming industry. Really, Glover feels like it was almost deliberately placed into these situations. The game was given a chance to thrive as Mario's glove, only to be taken back into obscurity. The game was good, solid, polished, and advertised, and then put into the same release week as Zelda. Realistically, it never mattered how good Glover's gameplay was, or how much they advertised it, or even if it sold well. How could it ever succeed? How could something like this ever avoid being forgotten? You know, maybe let's look at things this way. What could Glover have been if things went just a little bit differently? Well, it could have failed miserably. It could have sold poorly and been ridiculed the entire time. Things could have gone worse, even for a pretty solid game, but let's be honest, things could have been better. What if Glover released at a better time? What if people saw Glover in more of a spotlight? What if a Nintendo Power cover had a happy little glove on it? What if it reviewed better, not just being bumped down the list because it was being compared to Zelda and Turok? What if the Nintendo deal went through? What if Glover belonged to Mario? Would we still be thinking about him? One answer is yes, of course. In some way, at least, Spyro came out the same year as Glover, but for the PlayStation instead. That game was, I'd say, around as good as Glover, but it got a ton of sequels, a spin-off series, a remake trilogy for the PS4 and Switch. How was it so deserving and Glover wasn't? Did it sell better? Well, yes, by a lot. But there's surely some universe where these two are parallels, right? I mean, look at them. It doesn't seem like there's a huge dip in quality, and as somebody who played both games before making this video, I'd say that Spyro is only like slightly better. Certainly not enough better to be the difference between this and this. Why didn't Glover get another game, a big franchise? Glover 2 was greenlit shortly after the original game finished its development. The twins and the rest of the team were excited to have a second game, and importantly, they were excited to build off of what they'd already done. After all, making a sequel is bound to be less work than the original. They already had the engine made, the level editor created, all of these things that led to a faster, cheaper, and more effective development than the first game. Also, the team around the twins having more experience was probably really nice for them. You could have more ideas, more voices, more fun? I know a lot of sequels fall short, but how do you think it feels to create something and then immediately get told that people want another? That what you made was so good that people are watching you, waiting to see what you do next, putting their trust in your creativity. Of course people want to make sequels, especially in video games from this era where you can realistically do a decent chunk of the work by making new levels and areas, and people will be happy because that's just what they wanted. More of the same thing. It's gotta rule. So of course the Oliver twins and the rest of the team jumped at the chance to do Glover 2. Why wouldn't they? Glover 2, though, was going to be more than just a by-the-book sequel. They heard the criticisms about the first game's story feeling like an afterthought, and they took cues from other games of its time and really pushed the story to be a focus. Of course, they didn't want to take away from the gameplay that made the first Glover special. It would mostly be fun characters giving context and telling you where to go, what to do, but that would shake up the structure of the game by a ton instead of just level select areas in an empty hub world. If you compared the first Glover's tutorial, a weird, unexplained area with this hat shouting directions at you, to Glover 2's tutorial, which had you digging up ingredients and making a stew, only for that stew to be the spell to bring back the villain of the last game. I mean, my god, night and day. Combine that with new power-ups, better levels, cooler bosses. This was going to be good. Glover was already good without all that new stuff. Imagine how good it could be with some additional effort, a proven concept, a name that's already out there. Despite all of Glover's misfortunes so far, it finally had a chance to move forward, to reach towards that potential that it always had. If the next game did better, if it had a better release, if critics and stores realized that they had something nice on their hands, then maybe even the first Glover could come back into the limelight that it glimpsed. The game was set to release in mid-1999, and the team was excited to make something even better, something that could stand the test of time, something that could be seen as great. I'm sorry, you might be confused. Earlier in the video, when I was talking about Glover's legacy, I mentioned that it had no sequels. At the same time, I'm showing you footage from a sequel to Glover. The original Glover sold well enough, and not only this, the developers called their shot. The Oliver twins and the rest of the team at Interactive Studios thought that, Glover was a great game, but third-party games never sold nearly as well as Nintendo-published ones, and they were going to have some pretty stiff competition on release weekend, so a reasonable estimate, 150,000 copies. That's what they thought Glover would sell. When it hit the shelves, Glover sold approximately 150,000 copies. Their estimate was spot on. Astonishingly spot on, really, which makes it all the more confusing when I tell you that Glover 2 was canceled for financial reasons, because the first game lost a massive amount of money. How could this be? Well, despite the studio, the people who worked on this game, who knew the game inside and out, who knew the game's industry, because they had been working in it for years, giving them the perfect estimate to follow, management at Hasbro decided that they wanted to order 300,000 copies, double the initial estimate. Why? Nintendo had a special deal on N64 cartridges. If they ordered more, it would be a bit cheaper per cart. It's so stupid. A single, avoidable mishap. Some manager somewhere at Hasbro overrode all their judgment. The team couldn't have done anything better. They did all that they could, and at the end of the day, they got unlucky. Paid for somebody else's mistake. Glover was robbed of a future that it could have had. I would be so angry if I were one of the developers, one of the creators of the game. I'm angry for them right now. I'm upset that instead of cartridges for this game going on sale in 1999, I downloaded a dump of a halfway done copy that somebody uploaded in 2010. It sits on the cutting room floor, a preservation website, perpetually unfinished, almost completely forgotten. I found the whole deal about Glover 2's cancellation from a now deleted blog post made by one of the developers who worked on Glover 2. On the whole, he does come off as annoyed, upset about the circumstances. Of course, he says, the blame was put on the game and the brand itself rather than the idiot who ordered the extra 150,000 carts from Nintendo. He talks about the night the team got the news, how Phil Oliver gave the team lead some money and told him to take everybody out to drinks. He also talked about how he was still busy with other things at Interactive Studio, how he was able to move on pretty quickly, despite some obvious frustration at the management at Hasbro. The whole thing has this tone of, hey, listen to this story about something dumb that happened to me, instead of the whole tragic, melodramatic tone that I gave it. In a GameFAQs thread that somebody made about his post, people were commenting about how evil and shitty Hasbro was for treating the team poorly and not returning the small team's expensive production cartridges that they gave to them for testing. He kept things straight. Believe it or not, the relationship was pretty good. Keep in mind that we were doing several games for Hasbro at this point. Glover, Action Man, and Frogger 2. They just wouldn't give us back our bloody EEPROM carts. Smiley face. Earlier, he said that the cancellation was just one of those things. He was generally totally chill about it. Granted, he had well over a decade to get over any hard feelings, but it's been like 2.5 for me. I've had my entire lifetime to get over Glover. The game is older than I am. Why am I so upset about it? Glover was a game made with a lot of love. I know that's kind of cliche to say, but it really comes through when you play it. For me, there's an appeal that a lot of indie games also have, where you can feel their constraints. It makes a game feel loved, knowing that the devs didn't have as much time or money or other resources to pour into their work, but they've given you something nonetheless. Not to say that I think polish is a bad thing, just that sometimes imperfections can make something a little more special. In Glover, there's a kind of hidden level. In the normal Carnival bonus level, Glover shoots down cutouts of the wizard and other various Glover characters. If you input a specific code on the pause screen, though, you instead shoot down pictures of the programmers. As you can see, there's not very many different pictures. In the credits, there are only 5 people credited with programming the game, and 2 of those are credited as additional programming. Of course, this probably didn't take that much work to do to make this little level, these little texture swaps, but for some reason I really like the idea of them choosing to work on things like this, instead of improving the camera system or making the controls more intuitive. Fun things that make you feel like you're playing something that people really enjoyed making. Is that why I'm so upset that Glover's gone and forgotten? Because it had passion? Because the people making it enjoyed doing so? Maybe because that still wasn't enough? I feel like there are so many creatives, people who really love the things they make and love making them and are good at making them, and so few get to be remembered, get to be thought about for more than the few minutes while their work is being seen. Sometimes their work doesn't get to be seen at all. Sometimes they just never make it. Were they not good enough? Did they just get unlucky? So yeah, I'm upset that Glover had time and love and talent poured into it, but got a fraction of the recognition it deserved. Obviously, I feel that it deserved more. The question I need to ask myself, I guess, is how much attention, how much legacy would be enough? How much would make me happy? We don't have a way to calculate the amount of time that humanity collectively spends thinking about something. We have the things I've used throughout this video: sales numbers, critical reception, word of mouth, all these things trying to grasp at the success of Glover. It's some function of how many people played it, how many of those people liked it, and how far into time its memory can be fondly preserved. That's everything, right? How much of that does Glover have? Not enough. Surely, the game was never big, and its memory is fading faster and faster, and let's be real, this video cannot change that. So, if a genie were to grant me a Glover-related wish, if it were to undo the past and give Glover what I'd like for it, that would be the question. How much would make me happy? Would I be happy if Glover was Mario's glove? If it got that little bit more polish, that little bit more advertising? Would I be happy if Mario's glove was inevitably forgotten and labeled as that one weird Mario spin-off game for the N64? Or would we be right back where we started, with me needing to convince people that this game existed? Would I be happy if Glover was a blockbuster hit? Would I be happy if it saw the amazing success of Banjo-Kazooie, a game which I will freely admit is probably better than Glover? What if you got to play as Glover in Smash Bros? All of this would be cool. But would it be enough? Lots of Banjo-Kazooie fans lament the current state of the series after its studio was bought out by Microsoft, released a rough sequel, and then saw most of the talent who made the original Banjo-Kazooie games leave and make their own studios with varying degrees of success. Banjo-Kazooie could have been so much more. Are they happy even though they know that? Okay. What if, at the very least, Glover's sequel wasn't canceled? The sequel that I've spent so long talking about, the one they deserved. Would I need another one? Another after that? When would I be happy with it ending? There is a Glover subreddit and a Glover Discord, both very small. The Discord is mostly dedicated to speedruns of the game. If you watch their speedruns, you'll see an absolutely insane mastery of Glover's intricate controls, and new runs pop up a lot, challenging for the top spots. People in the Discord are nice. They answer questions from anybody new. They congratulate people on their runs, and they lament the fact that the port of Glover up on Steam right now failed to capture the magic of the original N64 version. The subreddit sees a new post every month or two. Normally it's fan art or fun clips from the game, or a school project somebody made because of Glover, or also lamenting the bad Steam port. Listen, it really isn't a good port. If you dig around on Twitter, you'll find Glover fans, people posting about childhood memories with it. So yes, Glover's impact is limited and its importance is shrinking, but there are hundreds of people that Glover makes happy, that still think about Glover, that spend their free time playing it. Why isn't that enough for me? Hey, I have a question for you. Are you enjoying this video? Do you think it's good? Are you having fun watching it? Maybe you think it's doing fine. It's entertaining enough for what it is with my budget constraints and my limited time. Do you think I experimented enough, or do you think it's a bit cliche? Do you think that Glover doesn't really warrant a video like this? I get it. Am I on your second monitor right now? Could you move me to your main one? Do you like how I'm editing myself? Do you think I display enough personality? Have you seen any of my other videos? Were you waiting for the next thing I made? How's this video doing? Is it weirdly popular, or did things not quite pan out that well? Do you think this one will hit the algorithm? Have I done everything I can? Did I get unlucky? I really love Glover, and I wanted to make a video about how much I loved Glover, but maybe that's not enough. After all, I'm probably not getting a ton of views from the die-hard Glover fans out there. Maybe there's just things that will naturally do better than whatever this is. Maybe I should stick to what I know works. Will you remember this video? Will you tell a friend about it? Do you want me to make another one? Would you care if this video was my last one, if I decided to just do something else, if I decided to stop? Does this video remind you of somebody else? Do I remind you of somebody else? Will you remember what my face looks like by this time tomorrow? Do you know my name? Were you not listening? Will you remember this moment? These 30 minutes where I talked about a thing that doesn't matter. If you saw me in the street, would you recognize me and stop me and tell me that you liked my video about Glover? Will you even care about any of this in an hour? Will you forget this? Will you forget me?
It might not be so bad to die, believing in a lie.
I have to come clean. At the beginning of this video, I told you that I would show you why Glover is important. I know Glover's not important. I just really wanted it to be. So maybe a better question would be, why does Glover need to be important? Why do I feel the need to justify my feelings for this game with indignation at its short-lived legacy? Why can't I just let it be? We all deal with uncertainty, and sometimes you flip a coin and it lands on tails, and then tails again. You get unlucky. Maybe you did something wrong. Did you deserve it? Does it matter? The thing about getting unlucky is that everybody aside from you forgets about it very, very quickly. But what's the difference between being forgotten yesterday and being forgotten tomorrow? Is it worth it to maximize the minutes people think about you? The fear of bad luck or making a wrong decision I didn't know I was making, it's paralyzing. If I choose the wrong thumbnail or people don't like the very start of this video, YouTube will not show it to people. And if these things go well, it might have 1 million views. Either way, maybe I'll never make another video ever again. Maybe I'll quit my job and make them every month. When would you be happy with it ending? In about 75 seconds, this video is going to end and an advertisement is going to take the place of the black screen it leaves behind. Are you going to sit there? Are you going to watch this again? Are you going to try and remember every single little piece of it? How I edited myself, what I looked like, what my name is? Are you going to get angry if I wasn't lucky? Will you be sad that eventually everybody will forget this no matter what? No. You're going to click on the next video or get up or continue playing Valorant on your main monitor or whatever. I think I actually like this being a passing memory of yours. Maybe a year from now this video will pop up again, maybe my next video will, and you'll say, oh right, I remember that Glover video. Because when the music stops and the screen fades, I don't really want you to think about me that much. I just want you to know that for a few months, I really liked Glover.
I want it.